Hey everyone, we're joined now by former Tesla insider Farzad Mesbahi. Talk all things Q1 earnings for the company, new vehicle strategy, the Robotaxi, and so much more. Farzad, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me. So much to talk about. A lot has changed in the last 12 hours in the story of Tesla. So yeah, I can't wait to get into it.
And I'm sure in the next 12 hours, maybe more things will change. We'll get to the announcements from Elon Musk in just a second. But first, I really just want to get your sense on the Q1 numbers. I think any way you look at this, it does seem to be a really big earnings miss. You're talking year over year profits plummeting by more than 50%. First, what do you make of the performance of Tesla the first 3 months of 2024?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's a tale of two stories almost. You know, the numbers definitely came in lighter than expected. I believe the expectations were, if I remember correctly, 47 cents or 51 cents, and it came under that from the EPS perspective. Margins are down year over year, deliveries are down year over year. So from that perspective, the story has been doing great. Some of the challenges were a softness in global demand for EVs, China's big drop in EV sales, not just Tesla, but BYD and everybody else. And then you have sort of the reluctancy for some of the Western markets to adopt EV as fast as maybe Tesla and others wanted. So you have that, plus you had supply chain constraints the company cited. There was an issue, there was a conflict at one of the major throughputs for logistics that happened during Q1. They had a slow ramp in Fremont for the Model 3. So there was just a lot of factors that were driving those numbers lower. But I think really on the flip side, I think the reason why the stock moved opposite from what was reported was how the company framed their next generation vehicles. And I think the takeaway is, at least my takeaway is that the expectation for those vehicles was to be delayed based on some of the reporting that came out of Reuters and other places in the last couple of weeks. But instead, the company came out and said, hey, there's not actually a delay. They're coming faster than folks expected. So I think that's a dynamic is Tesla reported poor earnings, but they're trying to frame the story as, hey, the things that you thought weren't happening are actually happening faster than you thought. And I think that's why we saw the reaction we did.
So it appears to me as if the top really takeaway, at least in many headlines, is the announcement of an affordable EV. I remember that Reuters report several weeks ago that said, the company is going to scrap those plans. Elon Musk very quick to say, no, that's not right. What do you make of that particular announcement? And what do you think a new EV could mean for the company, assuming that these kind of projections from Elon Musk end up holding out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the overarching premise of this is that Tesla is trying to make an unbox process, sort of this Gen 3 thing that they've outlined that's supposedly trying to reduce the cost of manufacturing by 50%. It's going to be done in a much smaller footprint, but there is a lead time for that to come to fruition. In manufacturing, you can't just whip up a line overnight. It takes several years potentially to get those things up and running. And what the company communicated is that instead of waiting for that entire Gen 3 platform to come to fruition, instead they're going to look to leverage their existing lines in the Model 3 and Y and modify them so that the new vehicles, whatever these new vehicles are, that's still up in the air what they are, they're going to start leveraging those instead of waiting for the entire line process to be finalized for the Gen 3. So they'll modify them to bring some of the wins that they'll get from that Gen 3 process, put it in the existing line. And because you already have lines built out in Austin, Fremont, in Shanghai, in Berlin potentially, then it's not just waiting for the entire thing to come to fruition. You can start pushing the new cars through those lines. And that's supposedly what's going to allow them to come to market potentially up to a year sooner. I doubt that. I think it's probably, Tesla and Elon are known for being extremely optimistic with their goals. But the one thing that they did put out there was that instead of it coming in second half of 2025, they expect it to come earlier than that. So perhaps let's say as late as June 2025. And so that's how I view this, is they were able to leverage existing technology to bring that car forward. I still don't know exactly what it means though, from like a form factor perspective. A lot of folks are sort of trying to, speculate on it being a compact form factor, which I think that's still the case, but it's going to be on existing technology and the new technology versus it just being a brand new technology from the ground up.
You've been doing this for a long time. How skeptical are you of Elon Musk when he makes these announcements? I mean, clearly, we're not really talking about the first quarter performance of the company. We're talking about these new announcements, and I'm pretty sure that's what he wants us to be talking about today.
Yeah, that's you nailed it. That's what he wants everybody to talk about. He's saying, don't worry about Q1 going down. Q2 is going to be better. That's what they're saying. But let's worry about 2025. Let's worry about the compact car. Let's worry about Robotaxi. Let's talk about, this Uber competitor that's going to be potentially on just self-driving cars. I think from the history of Tesla, they're definitely very optimistic when it comes to their timelines. Some people say they might be misleading, but from my viewpoint, I think Elon Musk is somebody who tries to set a very far away goal for the team to try and execute against. And over time, what we've seen from the company is that oftentimes they're late, but they seem to meet the overarching goals, such as, profitable EV, 500,000 cars per year in 2020, getting some form of autonomy on the cars, so on and so forth. And that's coming to fruition. Super ambitious, never on time, but the larger goals appear to be hit. So, I think that's what he's trying to refocus people, maybe reminding them is like, hey, yes, we're extremely late, but we're coming. There's things in the works, we're coming. And so it's up to the individual to, decide if they feel like he's telling the truth or not.
I wonder if there might be too much coming. We talk about a Roadster, we talk about the Cybertruck, now you got the Cybertruck recall, now we got this new announcement of an affordable EV. Mm-hmm. Is there too much on the plate of the company? Also keeping in mind the fact that the company has just laid off more than 6,000 people between California and Texas, yet is trying to stick to this very ambitious schedule for the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, there's definitely a number of things that the company is working on from a product perspective. I don't think the layoff, to be completely honest, as somebody who used to work at the company, I believe, works better leaner than when it's not leaner, just from my experience. I think one of the wins that Tesla has as a company is that they have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talent. The number 1 and 2 companies that engineers want to work for are Tesla and SpaceX. And so they have a deep roster of people that are sort of chomping at the bit to work and get stuff done. And so if anything, I would say that the layoffs almost in an opposite manner is going to benefit them to get that stuff done, because when you're trying to do all these different technologies that are new to market, that requires a lot of innovation, you want to remove as much of that hierarchical sort of middle management stuff that could be happening, or just additional weight that could slow you down, and instead create an environment for people to just be free to try stuff as quickly as they can. And from my experience, and I think others that have worked in sort of entrepreneurial startup-y type cultures, is that you want less people, not more, to get stuff like that done. So I think it's just, I wouldn't view that as a concern. If anything, it's a positive in my eyes. I could be wrong, but that's how I view it.
Now, does Elon Musk himself have too much on his plate? Not the first time we've asked this question, obviously, but you got to sit there if you're a Tesla investor. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I'd imagine there's some frustration to say, my goodness, man, can you just focus on the company? Can you, I mean, the rockets are one thing, but can you not be going off and spending all this money on social media platforms and then stepping into it with other controversies? I mean, there's got to be a sense from so many people that this man's attention is inherently diluted or distracted from the core product that people so much care about at Tesla.
Yeah, another great question. I hear that a lot too, I'll say on the internet, on X, and on different forums, that people have a concern, they have a perception at the very least that he's distracted because of the X purchase. I think what's interesting there is if I go back to, say, between 2016 and 2019 timeline, where SpaceX and Tesla were going in parallel, and SpaceX trying to figure out reusable rockets, and Tesla was on the brink of bankruptcy. Those were two competing things that had to get done for each company to be successful. And he figured it out, right? And the teams, obviously, it's 0.1% Elon, it's 99.9% the team that's out there doing the work. So, I don't think this is really, if it was me in those shoes, I would 1,000 be, distracted, and I can only focus on one thing. But I think Elon has a track record of being able to work on multiple things at once. Now, could there an argument be made that X is taking away precious bandwidth that could have been used in Tesla for, say, the last couple of years? I think there could be an argument there, but I don't know if it's really as impactful for the long-term vision as maybe some people feel, because again, I do feel that Tesla and SpaceX in particular have a deep roster of talent that they can leverage in times where that talent is needed.
What were your takeaways from the call or general sentiments on Robotaxi right now?
Yeah, That's so that one's getting, yeah, that little piece is getting really exciting. It's quite clear that the company is extremely confident that they have what it takes to execute on autonomy with their current fleet. So what really the one piece of passage from the earnings deck was that that's not verbatim, but it's become clear that version 12, which is our current sort of 8 cameras plus a computer plus a neural net end-to-end system, AI brain in their headquarters, it's become clear that this will solve autonomy for the current fleet and cars moving forward. And so the company feels extremely confident that they have what it takes to essentially be a Waymo without the Waymo costs and with the scale that they have today of 2 million plus cars per year, which obviously creates this paradigm shift in the world of autonomy that says it's not going to cost you a couple $100,000 to create an autonomous vehicle. You're just going to be able to spend 25, 30 grand, maybe even less, to make an autonomous vehicle that could drive anywhere just based on image data, just on video data coming in. And they're so confident, in fact, that they put in their earnings deck a picture of what the ride-hailing app will look like, well, a mock-up at least. So at the very least, I think Tesla is really trying to frame themselves as not a car company. And they have been trying to do this for a while. The market, I don't think, is still buying it. That's a separate discussion. But they've been trying to frame themselves as an AI company that does have unique technologies, leveraging things like artificial intelligence to power a robotaxi network, to power a humanoid robot. And so I think for that to actually stick, there needs to be results on the P&L. Like, here's our revenue from robotaxi ride hailing. Here's our revenue from FSD sales. And I think until then, there's going to be some skepticism, but everything points towards that direction. And if you're somebody who, has driven an FSD V12 in a Tesla, which is something they mentioned on the call, is like, you don't really understand what Tesla is until you get into an FSD V12 car, then it's kind of hard to conceptualize this. And I agree with that. I mean, I own a Tesla with FSD V12, and I encourage people to try it because it really is something that's quite unique.
What's your timeline for Robotaxi? What has the company said in terms of when we can expect this thing to actually be released?
So they've been quite vague about this. They have an 8/8 event, so August 8th event, where they're going to talk in depth about the Robotaxi, whatever this Robotaxi thing means, or the cyber cab, which is another word that they use to describe this thing. So they're vague. My expectation is that they'll have some form of ride-hailing Robotaxi vehicle in at least one market by the end of next year. So be it somewhere in Florida, California, Texas, Nevada, all these different states that have regulations that allow self-driving cars to come to fruition relatively quickly. I think they'll work with those jurisdictions to get something up there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have something by the end of next year.
Farzad, what is the most important component of Tesla that you don't think the rest of us are talking enough about?
Oh, I love that question. Oh, that's such a good question. So there is a bit on the earnings call that was laid out about how, because of some of the softness in the EV market and a lot of the legacy OEMs pulling back their EV plans, so Ford, GM canceling plans, delaying plans, you've had the supplier base of battery manufacturers that have been ramping up battery supply for the better part of 3-4 years that now have a gigantic amount of supply that they are trying to offload. And some of the verbiage on the earnings call that Elon gave was that it looks like the battery suppliers are sitting on a ton of batteries, and they are selling them at very competitive prices. And this was within the context of the 4680 battery that Tesla makes in-house. The question was, what's going on there? And they're basically saying, well, that's not really that big of an issue because now everybody's selling batteries for dirt cheap. And so now you have this forcing function on Tesla as an EV maker that is already making profits on electric vehicles, that's going to have a forcing function of lower costs for the biggest percentage of costs that makes up their product, which is batteries, because everybody else can't make an EV at a profit. And I think that's super, super underrated for this year, especially when you already have Tesla dramatically lowering prices and still being profitable. They just unveiled their Model 3 Performance, which is basically a BMW M3 killer that's selling at get $45,000 out the door with the EV tax credit, and those battery prices are going to keep coming down for the rest of the year. I think that's something that people should look out for. And it also bodes well for this new car, this new cheaper car that's coming out potentially in the next 12 to 18 months, that's going to leverage the existing line and probably those same batteries as well. I think that's completely being ignored, and it's going to be a huge forcing function for Tesla to have really cheap cars that are really good value for money and profitable.
You know, it's one thing to talk with analysts. It's one thing to talk with investors. It's an entirely different substantive conversation to talk to someone who has the experience like you. I'm very grateful for the conversation. Farzad Mesbahi, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, JD. Appreciate you.